Voters are expected to make a big impact this election cycle. According to a nonpartisan research organization, they anticipate that voters under the age of 45 will make up as much as half of the people voting this November. With that in mind, Northern News Now's Isabella Zadras joins us live tonight from UMD. Isabella, you spend the day talking to younger voters there. What are they hoping to hear from the candidates tonight?
Laura, today I spoke with many students who shared their opinions about tonight's debate and what they're looking to hear from both Harris and Trump. College is a chance for students to live on their own and develop their own opinions. Now, as election season approaches, UMD students are expressing those opinions ahead of Tuesday's presidential debate.
So I'm looking for more of a civilized debate between policies.
I'm hoping to hear a little bit more about the reproductive issues that are going around.
A lot about gun safety after hearing about the Georgia school shooting.
Students, no matter their political preferences, seem to be interested and open to hearing from both Vice President Harris and former President Trump, saying that voters have the right to hear both sides and make up their own minds. But some students are looking for more than a natural-born leader.
They need to be polite. They need to have respect because you are representing one of the greatest nations on this planet.
Rowan Rennick says he's looking more at how the candidates choose to carry themselves in tonight's debate, but still wants them to address important issues to him.
We need to address the debt ceiling. We need to address government lockdown, and we need to address voter identity.
Rayanne Wilmot wants a candidate who will meet the needs of the American people.
Not everyone's going to be happy with their policies or happy with the way they implement them, but I think it does matter if they try.
Despite tonight's chance for the candidates to prove themselves, most students say they don't expect it to sway their vote. Will tonight's debate sway your vote?
No. No.
Probably not. I'm pretty set on who I'm going to vote for.
What do you look for in a candidate? Even though these students we heard from were in the political loop, I got the chance to speak with other students who told me that they did not know about tonight's debate or didn't think they knew enough to back up their opinions in an interview.
All right, Isabella Zadra reporting live for us tonight from UMD. Thank you, Isabella.